Good evening, everyone. Welcome to another fun installment of Drink and Draw Social Club with our very, very special guest this evening, the one, the only, the Dropsies, Bill Sienkiewicz.
There goes a tray of crayons. How you doing, guys?
It's just falling apart. We didn't get started.
That's it. It wasn't even our fault this time.
It's like
We got a good 15 minutes before it falls apart.
Yeah.
So, Bill, welcome.
Good to see you.
Thanks for joining
Thank you
us.
so much for having me. It's been I got some tough acts to follow.
Yeah,
we had some good
Like-
we had some good people lately.
Yeah.
Oh, you've had some killer ones. I mean, Howard.
We had some good people, and then we had Shaken. So.
yeah.
Shaken is like, I think he says half the stuff he I imagine him sometimes being in his own place and just saying stuff and cracking himself up. You know? It's like he doesn't need an audience. I mean, it's better with an audience, but he almost doesn't need one. He's just like.
Are you drinking anything, Bill?
Well, I've got 3 beverages here. It's my standard beverage array. One is a sparkling beverage. It's a Perrier, which is years ago I used to drink considerably, but it was mostly beer. Grew up on it, and so I would drink a case of beer a day. That was sort of the country New Jersey way. Yeah. And when I would be going out, I mean, I would drink a case while I was preparing. I would take a 6-pack. I mean, I would drink a 6-pack preparing, a 6-pack on the train ride into New York, and then 2 6-packs while I was at the party. And at a certain point, when I broke my drawing hand, also alcohol related, that's when I kind of gave up everything. I gave up coffee, sugar, beer, my marriage, chocolate. I mean, you name it. It was like I started running, and I'm like, okay, because I sort of felt like this is everything I'd worked for my entire life.
Yeah,
and it was it's like this was going to be my way out of New Jersey. And
did you ever have a weight issue with all the beer?
not as well. I mean, I worked out a lot now, but I was also when I was in my late teens, I would run and then I would smoke and drink. So at that age, I thought, well, it evens out, And then, but I was heavy. I was fat. I was actually fat as a kid, which and then wearing glasses and then having really when my adult teeth came in, they came in pretty crowded and stuff. So I went from being sort of very sociable, acting and writing school plays and directing them and stuff like that, to becoming this sort of, I mean, I love sports and everything, but I kind of became this insular, everything sort of became interiorized when I was, so, but I found that after I gave up beer and started running, it really helped a lot. I mean, in every, but I got because I really can't do things in moderation. Maybe it's like, everything in moderation, including excess,
Right.
So, I was running like 60 miles a week, and that got to be a bit much.
Yeah.
So,
You're lucky
but
you have knees left.
so what's that?
I said you're lucky you have your knees left.
Yeah, my knees have been pretty lucky. I mean, my shoulder from being at the easel is still a sort of a persistent thing, but I'm sort of used to it now. I mean, it's like I remember reading that George Clooney, when he was filming Syriana, like he got some damage to his head, and like to the point where it was so painful that he was contemplating suicide because it was so bad. Hey, way to start off the podcast. But anyway, back to the beverages. It's somebody suggested drink club soda with lemon, because if you're not getting drunk, at least you're not just sipping water. So now it's like he kind of gave my this little tingle. Now when I drink regular tap water, it's like water that went bad. It's like this is stale. And also I espresso. And then I also have a wee bit of Lafroig here. I got this is like the bottle, which is my go-to beverage of choice now. Yeah,
That's one of my favorites.
Well, here's the official.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Bourbon,
Buffalo
but the
Trace.
thing is that everybody sort of being in lockdown, it's really it's a little, sometimes it's a little too tempting to sort of like just go, let me just have so I try to keep it in, like I said, in moderation. So
yeah, I would never.
This is the perfect occasion. So there'll be a gentleman,
Oh.
So
excellent. Well, it's great to have you on the show, Bill.
Thank you for having me.
You were one of our favorite guests at Drink and Draw, the actual Drink and Draw events in LA.
Oh, that was so much fun.
Yeah,
I wish I could have made it to more of them. Because I'm a little bit more of an isolationist than and I'm actually pretty much an introvert, despite the fact that my ass is all over the Facebook.
We don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Good. Then let's just move on. Do
you mind if I ask you though, like, how did you?
Bill, I wanted to ask Bill. Hey, Bill, any career regrets?
Yeah. Actually, I try not to have too much or too many regrets, because as a kid, all I wanted to do is draw comic books.
Right.
And that I was perfectly content, to do that. And then when the clone stuff started, and then I went to art school and everything else, that's when it sort of blew open for me in terms of I was either going to get out or I was going to do all the stuff that I wanted to do. Because my love for the medium was so intense that it was like again really perverse visual for it, but it's sort of like comics were the goose, and and all the stuff I wanted to put into it was like the funnel. It's like the making a like comic book pate. So
you're a foie gras
for anybody out there who's like foie gras. Yeah. There you go. But it's like I thought the medium could handle anything. So. And I felt like I was getting paid to learn, and I think I imagine you guys have all felt that, because the old thing of just having to get one page done and move on, and you labor over one image, and then you watch your hourly rate or your page rate sort of drop to below minimum wage, and you go like, there were points when I was doing Moon Knight where I did one cover over 12 times.
Which one?
It was the one where Moon Knight's on the ground and there's a whole bunch of guys uplit. So I think I lost all you guys. So I'm not seeing the rest of you there.
We're still
I
here.
don't know.
We're here.
Okay. All right. But anyway,
Wait,
I mean, it got
that was my least favorite cover, Bill.
What was that?
That was my least favorite cover out of all of them.
Well, that one, the thing is that I did that one. There was a point when I would light box it, draw it in pencil, and then light box it, and I got so OCD over it that I would put down a half-inch ink line, and go, I screwed it up, That's not the one, but that was one I asked Denny about doing black and white covers, so I don't want to get ahead of ourselves here, but the idea of but as far as regrets, I suppose the failure of big numbers is still something that really hurts. It's something I wish I could go back and change things. Right. Part of the whole screw up of that, it's a little bit like Terry Gilliam, Don Quixote on the screen. I think he did a documentary called Lost in La Mancha. And since big numbers was about chaos and entropy and, the butterfly effect, the beating of the wings and seemingly, unrelated people, elements, things like that coming and having and impacting each other. And the story was all about that. I mean, Alan had it all mapped out. I was photographing like 45 different people for roles for that. Because I felt like every job I worked on or every series, I wanted to keep upping the game in terms of what I was attempting. And it's like when I went from Elektra Assassin to The Shadow, I felt like I was offered a chance to kind of, even though it was going to be based on Chaykin stuff, I was still in the mindset that I was going to try to push it into like the next step beyond Elektra Assassin. And then once I signed the contract, they said, no. It's like, we want the regular kind of inking and penciling. So I turned that into school. I mean, it's into like I went and I studied Booth, I studied Call, and and just turned it into an inking, drawing inking thing. So I mean, you can't complain if you're doing your life's job, what you love doing, and then a certain job doesn't turn out the way you want it to, or a certain series. There's always still something to learn and a way to make, if not lemonade, maybe lemon meringue pie or something out of it,
Right.
So, but the problem with big numbers was that, a lot of life things got in the way. My parents passed away. It's like I broke up with my girlfriend. A couple of the models that I used actually passed away, which was horrible. It was very sad. One was like I said earlier, I think in our pre-chat, it's like, way to start off the show with a lot of oomph, and positivity. But I mean, but in terms of the that, and the other thing is that also, at that time I was living in Westport, and Westport had a lot of actors and writers and performers of all sorts, news people, and I also had a 9/11 and a mullet, and so it was hard to kind of go to some. I actually had a woman who I was working with who would sort of reach out to people, because I said I need like models, like especially for kids, because there's that sequence I think in the first issue where first and second issue, the kids are throwing rocks at the train, and also making Molotov cocktails, like they're draining the gas, like the petrol out of the cars, and it's like I'm not the kind of guy who wants to walk up to kids at a playground. And
just start. Can I take pictures of you?
Society really frowns on that, especially if their moms are nearby, so I basically had to also tell them, look, they're making lemonade. It's like, because the idea of telling them that, look, they're going to be like siphoning gas from a car. They're making, it's like people sort of bring their own thing to it. It's like, look, you have to understand, they're just posing for pictures. I just need the poses,
Right.
And there were a couple of people who were really like afraid that somehow I was misinterpreting who they were as people, and I had to actually like reassure them. I said, I'm not. This isn't you really. It's like you're providing a likeness. I mean, these are people who are not models. I mean, there was the Indian gentleman who had the train set in the basement, and he was a very sweet guy, but had no familiarity whatsoever with it. I mean, I just showed him some samples of the work, and he said, "Let's give it a try." Other women that I knew, like one of the older women in the story, I think the kleptomaniac was actually the woman who used to run the newsstand downstairs. I would see her every day. So, and a lot of my other friends that I knew. It's looking great, man.
So they felt as though they themselves were being misrepresented because they were posing for characters that weren't them?
Well, I think they felt that if a character in the story does something that they wouldn't do, like somehow I was putting out this kind of karmic impression of them that was that was sort of defiling their personhood. And I can respect that. But I had to kind of go out of the way. So there was a lot of negotiation that was above and beyond sort of just the normal, hey, I need, because a lot of times I'm sure we've all had situations where you're walking up to somebody and say, hey, can you pose for this cover or that or whatever? And people oftentimes will jump. People who absolutely have no idea about comics whatsoever. You're dealing with a segment of society where what we do is, I remember early on when I told some people I drew comic books, there was one person who actually said to me, do they still do those? And they said, like in the newspapers, it's like, I thought that, and one person even said, I just thought they were just there, as if like somehow you cut down a tree and it's like, oh, look, there's Blondie, we got a good one today,
Right.
I don't, when I use the word ignorant, I don't mean it in a disparaging way. It's just that there are things there's plenty of things that I don't know about a lot of things that I'm just simply ignorant to, you know. I mean, there are things I do know and don't like, which I'm sure we all do, but then there's other stuff that is
people on this,
you know, completely. So that was,
I don't like so much.
What's that again?
There's people on the live stream I don't like so much, but we do it.
Yeah.
Well, it's what we have is a mutual toleration. You know? The admiration is mixed in there as well, I'm sure, but it doesn't mean we have to like, you know.
Right.
You know, it's like, so there was the biggest blow for me was my friend, and I'm God forbid, I feel horrible, but she and I were really close. The woman who would model for the main character, we became really tight, and then she invited me to her wedding, and I actually gave her. There was a T-shirt that was made with numbers on it and her face in it and everything else, and she was great. She had these really dark, soulful eyes, and she was, you know, perfect. And I said, look, when you get back from your honeymoon, like I need you for the next issue, you know. I mean, because there were other models. There was one kid who played a young kid, and then between issues, he had a growth spurt. So it was like he all of a sudden he went from being a toddler or a kid to being, you know, like he sprouted like six to, you know, and he started to like his voice was beyond cracking. So there was, again, it was all of the life stuff that started going in there, you know. And she said, "Oh, I'm not coming back. I'm moving to Germany. My husband's in the military, and I'm going to be living in Germany." And my response was sort of really bizarre because it was almost like, you know, like she's getting married. I'm at the wedding, and I give her that a piece for the wedding gift and everything else, and congratulations. And then I felt like, you know, like, how could you do this to me? You know,
Yeah.
I thought, you know, so it was, you know, you're dealing, especially if you're dealing with models or people that are relate, you know, that, and especially for something that's a 12-issue gig. It's and again, like the pose and stuff that, like, we've all posed for our own photographs, I'm sure.
I have hundreds of Polaroids of studio mates. Many of them are Dan.
Yeah.
Right.
And a lot of them are unsolicited poses.
Yeah.
Well, lots of when he's sleeping. You
Well,
know, I like
the candid ones are often the best because those are great for conversation shots.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I actually had one, Stan Drake, who for those who don't know Stan Drake, shame on you too. For those who don't know Stan Drake, he was one of the most amazing comic book illustrators ever with The Heart of Juliet Jones, romance strip. And then he took over Blondie. And he was sort of like my father, my brother, my mentor, my drinking buddy. And, to whatever extent I drank, you know, during that period of time, it's like, but he, at one point, he actually played Christine Gathercole's dad. And at one point, in the story, he was eating his breakfast on the toilet. And Stan was like, you really want me to post? So I'm asking this legend to basically sit on the, you know, the porcelain throne and, you know, and eat like out of on a plate, you know, like, you know, of course there was no food on. I put all that stuff in there, but it was like he kept shaking his head. So this is like, you know, he was laughing, but he also, I think when you see how the sausage is made, so to speak, you know, people only see the finished results usually. Right. So
you don't see the bathroom scenes. You don't.
Right. Well, yeah, or the reference shots or what goes into it. You know, it's sort of like the when they're shooting glamour shots of you know, hamburgers or whatever, and everything is arranged just so, and the glycerin is on there to make it look absolutely delectable. And then when you actually go to the restaurant, you know, it's all been smushed down, and you know, it's like a bait and switch. You know?
Yeah.
Right? Don't they use Elmer's glue for mayonnaise or something? There's
something like that. Yeah, I think so. Yeah. I think so. I think to make it look absolutely delicious, majority of what they use for those photo shoots is probably completely inedible. You know?
Yeah.
I mean, like styrofoam and, you know, and
right,
and stuff like that.
So it seems like you use a ton of. Oh, go ahead,
In
Jeff.
truth, a lot of what they make the actual burgers out of is
just to finish up, I'll finish up the whole thing about big numbers. It all just sort of went south, and then I had problems with my assistant at the time, who and that was another whole drama. And then so that
was
to
Al
me,
Columbia, right?
I'm sorry.
Was that Al Columbia?
I think it's probably best to leave that alone.
Oh, all right.
He's fine. Hope he's doing well. We haven't spoken in a long time.
Way to go, Dave.
Yeah.
Yes,
So, but
done.
he's a very talented guy. Let's just say that we had our differences. So I'm not shying away from anything. I just
Listen, we don't trouble.
no, it's all good. But the thing is
No
that
drama.
when it finally all went sideways, it's like, and then a couple of years go by and people would ask about it. I realized that I've become more introspective or circumspect about the whole thing now. I look back at it and go, in a weird way, big numbers is actually, the failure of big numbers is kind of a meta example of how chaos and life will sort of, the fact that it like 2 issues. Well, actually, I did 3. But with the loss of people's lives, to people moving away, to people growing up, just the fact that I'd also set such a high bar for myself in terms of productivity, because this was before computers. So, like, there was one scene where I did a down shot of a coffee cup with milk swirling in it, and like now you can just use you can grab a photo offline, or you can use a swirl filter or whatever. Back then, what I did was I made a bunch of circles on a piece of paper, and then what I did was I mixed white and black paint, and I took a stick and I kept swirling, and I was hoping that the paint was thick enough not to look like paste, but and then hopefully it wouldn't all blur together into this gray blob, and then and keep kind of a little bit of a swirl to it. So,
I saw you do a demo once, and you were painting what looked like a car, and it was probably maybe an hour-long demo, or maybe a little bit longer, but at various times you were in a big studio. I don't know if it was an LA one or it was a New York studio, but at various times I'm like, that's finished. That's a completely finished painting. And then you'd go in and it's almost like starting from scratch, but right over it by using different washes and techniques. I'm like, oh my God, it's a brand new painting. It's better than it was before. And it just kept evolving. It was amazing to watch the whole process.
Oh, thank you. I mean, I think, I've had so many studios over the years. There was, the one that like my room when I was growing up, what I did was I took an old desk and I just pulled open the drawer. My father taught me electrical wiring, so I wired up a fluorescent light and put some tin foil under it. And
that sounds dangerous.
A piece of glass. Yeah, it was probably, but it's like, at that point I knew how my father would help me check it out. And then he also fixed television sets. And so we had to get like this really thick tempered glass. So, and then in my drawer, I could keep all my utensils and stuff like that and things on the top as well. But, and then moving to Westport, after I got married, one room was a studio, and then I needed to get out of the house and have a separate studio. So I had a studio not far from where Martha Stewart lived, and that was a real sort of like hoity-toity sort of area. And I didn't fit in there at all. And then when I moved to the Westport studio, the main Westport studio with there was Leonard Starr was there.
Oh, cool.
He was also, and John Prentice, Frank Cole Jr., myself, and there were a couple of women who were, I think they worked in insurance or something like that, but they were also really creative because they were caretakers, so they would they would wear clown noses and stuff like that and do things for charity. So they were really sweet. They were also in big numbers. So that was right in the center of town, and that was great. And then I moved to a grammar school that had been converted into an art center, and I had an entire classroom.
That was it. That was the one.
Yeah, that's where Dennis would come up. Dennis Cowan, when he would model for me for Jimi Hendrix. But that school also had a bunch of great fine artists and sculptors, and then some illustrators. Like there's an illustrator named Jim Sharp. Used to do a lot of TD guide stuff. I think he moved back to Denton, Texas, but that was the weird thing about Westport. You never knew who you were going to run into. You know, I mean, it was just everything was about art, and you know, everybody was sort of friendly with each other. And the only person that really kind of was left alone was Paul Newman. Nobody bugged him. You know, nobody would go up to him at all. You know, you know, it was, you know, I mean, it's like everybody thinks about Los Angeles or whatever, but it's like, you know, and it was a small town 1 hour from New York. I mean, the famous artist school started there, you know, and then it became the headquarters for Save the Children, you know, so everything just sort of moves past. So anyway, I know that it took a long time to answer Joe's question. You know, regrets, but that's about the biggest one, you know, in my work that I can think of. That, and you know, and I was going to say breaking my drawing hand, but in a weird way, that actually probably was the biggest and best turning point for me. So, and a number of artists have broken their drawing hands. I mean, Barry Smith and I sort of bonded over that, you know, for pretty much the same reasons. You know,
I broke a couple of fingers on this hand so much. I was doing karate and I lost. So, and I messed up. How did you break your hand? What were you doing at the time?
Well, it was a, you know, I think to sort of preface it a little bit, like when my wife and I at the time, we grew up on farms that were very sort of near each other. So we were country kids, and I once I started working at Marvel, it's like I wanted to move away, and you know, and in my family, and you know, when you leave that much of a rural area, you know, to go make it out in the world, sort of thing. There's a lot of resistance from family members, and there was also a lot of intrusion. You know, like my father would just come to the house that we had, and also it was just like we got to get out of here. So I think we got married to move away, you know. And then an offer came up to move to Westport, and it was like, let's do this. So, in my again, this was back when I was drinking, and I remember my grandfather had given me something of his as like a kind of a keepsake, and my grandfather was the one. He was a coal miner, you know, and like even in his 70s, he looked like Charles Bronson, you know,
cool,
because you know, he was like down there just with a pickaxe and, you know, in horrible conditions and stuff. And he was the one who told my father, he said, look, if Bill wants to be an artist, let him be an artist. And that's when my father finally relented, because he wanted me to have a real job. And I'm sure maybe you can relate to this as well, that if you're given the opportunity to have something to fall back on, you'll fall back on it. It's like, so I literally I made myself absolutely unsuitable for any other type of work.
Perfect. Smart.
Well, it was, you know, I was too naive and you know, and I don't know, focused to be scared. You know, so we had come back from a party, and I was, you know, drunk. She was drunk, and I couldn't find. It was actually something that was attached to my keychain, and for all I know, it might have even been like an old bottle opener or something like that he'd given me. And I was furious, so I I punched the garage door, and it, you know, and because it was on the rollers, it kind of gave, you know, like that back and forth thing.
Sure.
And then and my wife was standing behind me at the time, and she said, she, in this very sort of sarcastic, snide voice, said, "You feel better?" And that set me off. And then, you know, it's like, you know, the old, you know, you don't hit a woman. It's like, I mean, that's ingrained. So what I did was there was a cast iron trellis support right near the garage that held up all these vines at the house we were living in. And, so that in the summer it had this kind of canopy thing where you could eat outside. It was actually really nice, and I felt something in my right hand kind of like hurt, like move. And I thought I sprained it, and I drew 2 days with it. And then I said, let me get it checked out. And the doctor said, no, you broke it. And that was like when everything started to snowball, in terms of like, I need to make a major life change. And so there was an issue I did of Moon Knight with a sandstorm and a guy with a scimitar fighting. And if you look inside the issue, you could tell when the pages start getting simpler, like Moon Knight is in the crypt of Khonshu, and he's like, there's a big statue, and there's a lot of like empty negative space, and I think there's like the figure sitting almost Buddha-like with his hands across him, like, and Moon Knight is standing there. I drew those pages with the broken hand, because it was like we had a deadline. What can I say?
Right.
So,
Jeff, have you ever hit anything in anger?
You occasionally.
It's true.
Yeah.
I thought you guys refer to those as love taps. Come on.
yeah. Just warming up. So, Bill, like I know everyone probably already knows, but just for someone out there who might not know, what was your first gig? What was your first comic book that you that did? Not necessarily for Marvel, but did you do anything before that?
In art school, I worked with a bunch of fellow comic book fans. We produced 2 or 3 issues of this magazine called Watch Out, because one of my favorite teachers, the guy who really sort of became like a father figure to me, this big, tall, black guy who used to wear a beret, and did fashion like illustration as well. I think he played in jazz bands, and he got it. He like when you find someone, again, I don't know all of your family histories, but I always felt like the oddball, like the odd one out, like the black sheep. Like I couldn't explain a lot of why I felt certain things, or like why when my father wanted me to go out hunting and I had a deer in my sights, and I realized I would rather paint it than shoot it.
Right.
That really sort of upsets the order of things. But he was the guy where it was like I felt like we spoke the same language, and we did. So there were a bunch of he was the guy who put it all together, and we did a couple of issues, and then at the end of the second year, there was it was a 3-year school. A lot of my friends, because I became friends with more of the upperclassmen who were. Because in my second year, I had to pick either illustration, fine art, or advertising. And I said, well, I want to take some of all. And they said, you can't do that. And so what I did was I took illustration, but I would walk out of some classes and go into fine art painting. And they did not like me at all. Because I was sort of breaking the tradition of sort of the art, like the whole studio atmosphere, but after that, my second year, everybody graduated. I took from May 3rd, like around my birthday, to June, and put together maybe 15, 20 pages portfolio of DC stuff. And because I didn't think my work was good enough for Marvel.
Oh, really? You thought there was a difference?
If nothing else happens. Well, I think because there were guys like Grell and Michael Nasser at the time, who were doing a lot of sort of. I mean, let's face it, Neil impacted a lot of us. So I sort of felt I really loved his Batman, and even though I'd moved on in terms of my appreciation for like fine art and abstract expressionism and guys like Diebenkorn and Rauschenberg and, even Warhol, I mean, with some of his photo manipulation stuff. Again, a lot of stuff that I would put in my sketchbooks, but I thought, okay, if I'm going to try to get into comics, Neil was the guy I mainlined throughout my teenage years. So didn't want to like draw exactly like him or like ape like or steal from him, but I wanted to kind of go beneath the surface and understand, how anatomy. I would drill myself, like I would study all these anatomy books, and then I would close the book and then try to write down, like draw the knee from memory, and then label all the muscles. I mean, at one point awesome. I knew all the muscle names. Now I just know where they insert and stuff like that. But it was like putting myself through boot camp. And so that day I went in and I was like Lil Abner. I mean, I was, I took the train in and, put on a suit, and that was probably 100% polyester. I don't think there was a natural fabric anywhere on me. I just waited in the waiting area. And this is before you needed to have like blood samples and leave your like a down payment and your ID and have somebody swipe you in. There was none of that. I just waited. I just sat and waited. I didn't even have an appointment. And they finally let me in to meet Vinny Coletta, who was the art director at the time.
Oh, cool.
And Vinny looked at my stuff and he goes, "I really like your stuff, kid." But he said, if I give you work, you'll be out on the street in 2 weeks, because at that time, the implosion, whatever the DC implosion thing was happening. So he said, "I tell you what," he goes, "hang on." And he gets on the phone and he calls up Chris Adams at Continuity and says, "Tell your dad there's a guy I want to send over." So I walked over to Continuity, and I'd never met Neil. So I was just like nervous as hell. And Neil pokes his head around the corner, goes, "You're the kid that Vinny called me?" And I'm like, "Yeah." So he opens up my portfolio, and then everybody at Continuity sort of gathered around, and as Neil's flipping through the stuff, and Alan Weiss and Dennis Cowan. I mean, all these people later, and I've been raised to be, super polite. It's like, "Oh, hello," and of course later on I learned, as we all do, that people in this business are pretty low key and, and easy going. But I was, like, "Yes, sir," "No, sir." I mean, that, of course, that ship has sailed, but, I mean, I'll still hold doors for people and stuff like that, of course. But, so Neil was really complimentary. And then he got on the phone and called up Shooter. And
I had a question about that.
Yeah.
A lot of your covers, I mean, Marvel was doing some pretty adventurous stuff cover-wise and art-wise, but I know Jim Shooter had a lot of ideas as far as storytelling goes and what was going to be in comics and what wasn't. But your cover, like, evolution from, say, Moon Knight #1 to, some of the more famous ones are just dramatic. And they just, like a black and white cover, it just seems like something that in that short amount of time would be kind of a big deal, that they'd give a relatively newer guy this kind of leeway.
Well, I think a lot of that, I mean, I think we can all pretty much agree that a lot of the stuff that gets passed through and goes to print, a lot of times it really depends on having the editorial support, the people behind you who will say, push it, and say, run with it. Just like, whether they want to, they're fans themselves and are excited, or whether, like in the case of some of the editors I worked with at Marvel, a lot of them didn't much care for Jim Shooter's sort of dictates, and so they would want to do things that would not necessarily rile him up, but get his attention. And Jim would get a bad rap because he actually was, even though he had his ways. I mean, he and I would bust each other's chops, a lot. And but I had sort of snuck in under the, in the Trojan horse of something that was familiar, the Neil Adams thing. And then somewhere around I don't know, coming out with a lot of fans writing in saying, and critics saying, it looks like Bill Sienkiewicz learned to draw from that looks fantastic. That Dazzler piece, man. I love it.
Nice, Dan. Yeah, that's sweet, Dan.
Wow.
Yeah. Kind of distorts it a little bit. I got to figure out a little better setup. Sorry.
No, it's all good. But and let me know if because I don't want to go on and on. And
oh no,
please go. Yeah.
But
that's the whole reason you're here.
Yeah.
I'll do the Stephen Wright thing where I give one word answers to Conan.
No.
So again, having the editorial support, but at that point, when I got the negative responses, I took it somewhat personally, and I sort of felt I don't want to say victimized because that's wrong, probably the wrong term. Because I grew up, even though I had siblings, there weren't a lot of people or a lot of kids that I hung out with, who read comic books. As a matter of fact, I couldn't buy comic books in New Jersey. I used to buy them on weekends when we'd go visit my grandparents near Scranton. And my grandmother and grandfather would give me some money, and I would go to the spinner rack and just like download. Like I'd start with DCs and Marvels, and then I would get to the Charltons, and then Sad Sack, and and even to the stuff where like Little Lotta and Dot, with the OCD girl with the this obsession with dots, and so to me, I fell in love with comics and comic strips because I sort of felt that there were all of these styles. And some of the stuff was funny, some of the stuff was serious. Same thing with the newspaper strips, and it just grabbed me. And I said, "This is what I want to do." So when I was doing that, like the Moon Knight, I took it, and I felt I'd already had plenty of stuff in my sketchbooks, and I had conversations about trying more abstract things. And my wife at the time, and then other people that I talked to at Marvel, and they said you can't do that. That's not how it's done. And I remember I would ask like, well, but why not? How come? I like give me a reason. Like just be like that's not the way it's done doesn't make any sense to me.
Right.
And so I got really angry, and I figured I would just channel it into like, screw it. I'm going to either do the kind of stuff I want to do, or I'm getting out. It really came down to that. It's like I've got to be, me through all of my influences, and they continue to be. I'm influenced all the time. You fine gentlemen do that every day. It's just like I love and respect anybody who can work in this medium. Because like in terms of the sausage being made, we all know how hard it is to pull a piece together, especially on a deadline.
Yeah.
So that's when it started to. I just started to sort of push it back a little bit. I started plotting stuff like Hit It. That was my story, and then Doug did the words for it. And that was my attempt to try to get a musical beat into comics. And the black and white covers, I just said, I remember I'd go into a comic shop and say, there are all of these covers. It's like that Charlie Brown cartoon where he's standing in front of a rack of comics and he says, what a beautiful, gory display. I felt like there were all of these bright colors fighting for attention. I said, what if we, do the old thing, if everybody's yelling, why don't you whisper? So I said, let's try a couple of black and white covers. And Denny said, we'll do every other cover because we don't want to alienate anybody. And which was fine by me. And that's when I started using the spatter and other things. And but when Hit It came out, which I think was issue 26, I figured I would just stay on because I felt like I was done with Moon Knight. In a weird way, it's almost like Moon Knight was almost the least relevant aspect of it for me. It was like there were stories that I just wanted to tell and styles I wanted to try. And that's when I really sort of felt like I'm ready to move on. So I stayed till I think issue 30, and then Kevin Nolan came in and took over. So, and then I was pretty much done. I just wanted to do covers. That's when I started doing the Dazzler covers. I wanted to just paint. I felt like I had been like liberated in a way. And, you know, emboldened to just sort of be myself, come hell or high water, because at that point I literally did not give a fly. I was, you know,
you're allowed to curse.
Fuck,
yeah, you can curse. Yeah, well, I mean, yeah. Well, I think definitely one of the things I've always loved about your work is just how much personality it has, how much unique. It's clearly a unique perspective, and it's always been startling. You're like, oh shit, that's a Bill piece. That doesn't look like anything else.
Yeah, because Jeff actually, I don't know if you've seen some of his work. It's a little bit, I guess, devoid. I think you'd use.
I mean, it's certainly derivative. Yeah.
Yeah.
No. Well, thank you.
Wow.
That's very kind of you. But for me, look, there are master technicians out there, you know, in terms of you know, what the old illustration term was before it was, you know, rivet men, you know, the people would give you all of the details of every nut and bolt. And then you look at some illustrators like John Berkey, where he would give you, you know, who did the poster for King Kong, a remake by Dino De Laurentiis and the Towering Inferno, where if you look at it up close, it's just a lot of it's impressionistic. You know, it wasn't like he'd been there and just done every little window. So there, like I said, there are guys who can draw rings around me, you know, but I feel like I wanted to be able to draw and paint well enough. It's like learning another language, because if you have things in your head or your gut that you want to get out, I sort of feel that the schooling aspect of it, you know, falling back on the classically trained stuff of, you know, value arrangement and composition, dominance and subordination, and, you know, color wheel, shape wheel, you know, because I mean, people tend not to think about, you know, that there's an actual shape wheel as well, you know, you know, different kind of musical terms, because when I paint, I hear musical beats in my head. And so for me, when I got into jazz and art school, I realized that the one thing that has sort of come to me over time that I've learned about myself, if I have any niche at all, is that I'm really more about emotion of a piece, and, you know, and capturing something that you know, that evokes something. You know, and if some of that means like some of the stuff is scratched out, or you know, the analogy I've used before is that if you take the same photo reference and you do a very delicate, you know, line drawing of a woman's face, and then you do the same exact pose, but you do it with a huge, thick black shape, you know, like piece of, you know, charcoal or something, and let's say you just nail the likeness. The pieces are of the same woman, but the emotional responses that people have to them, they get under people's skin. They respond to it on a very visceral level. And
great example.
You know, so to me, that's what I feel that I try to bring to pieces. I mean, because what Dan said earlier about like that, I think it was a motorcycle I might have been painting. I think that Marl hired me to do the Ghost Rider motorcycle. So it was something like that. But I find that I can do really tight, and then but what happens is, maybe because of the way I grew up or whatever, I start to feel very claustrophobic. I start to feel like I can't breathe, and to me, some of that is the sort of laying of the groundwork. It's like sometimes in watercolor and other mediums, it's like if you have to do a tapestry in the background, and again, without Photoshop or like pulling out a pattern from a file, if you're going to paint something it's like sometimes the only way to do it is to just simply sit down and do it. It's like there's no quick way to do it. Now, again, with digital stuff, a lot of things are easily replicable and sort of can be dropped in. But then after I do that part, I kind of go into the piece, and I start what I just start to fuck with it. It's like I start abusing it and unifying it to sort of set myself free, because I feel like I've done all of this stuff, and if the piece feels too tight, and to other people it might look done, or and there are plenty of times I've overstepped where I went like one step too far. I should have stopped back then. And so for me, it's all about the emotional response, and that's one thing I feel even more so now with a lot of the memorial portraits I've been doing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, those have been amazing. Those always
people who've passed have impacted me personally.
Right, but you capture the not just their likeness, but you capture almost a moment of them in time.
Oh well, thank you. I mean, that's sort of what I set out to try to do. And again, it's entirely subjective. I mean, in terms of what this person meant to me, and then but the responses from people, because it's almost like it like the one thing about Facebook is that it is there, and then obviously, podcasts like this and shows like YouTube like this, it's a communal experience. So we're all sort of in this thing together, kind of a thing. So, and people were responding to that. And so there was a period of adjustment as well, because there were times I started to feel a little ghoulish, and not wanting to know about somebody who passed. But there were people also who passed away that I felt deserved to, who may not have been, quote, famous, but were important in one way or another. And so I'd read up on them if I didn't know about them or whatever. At the same time, because I would like on the morning of, I mean, I've done celebratory pieces or birthday pieces for people, but when the finality of existence is such that if you're going to do a memorial piece, it's like I would wake up and I'd see who passed, like some like say Glenn Campbell or somebody passed away, and then I would find some reference that I felt sort of captured who I felt he was, because I grew up on him. I mean, we grew up with country western music and polkas,
Right.
So, so for me, it was. I also felt that, look, I'm not getting paid. These are personal pieces. So in a weird way, they're like sketchbooks, and also, so in a way, it was kind of a chance to give myself. I wasn't pushing into any new territory in terms of design or abstractions and stuff like that. I was trying to maintain likenesses, but I would play with materials and methods and different, techniques. So in a weird way, it was also kind of a sense of, again, going back to school. So the pieces sort of did double duty. It was like, capture a likeness, capture an essence of somebody, and then also maybe use some stuff I hadn't used before or in a while or anything else. So what's on your table right now? Are you working on a piece? Well, I've got a couple of things I'm working on. I'm waiting to hear back from a client. I can't actually. I just realized I was told I can't mention it. So but if it's my own failing. I realize if it does go through, it'll be a little bit of an interesting, probably unusual. Let's put it that way. But I'm working. I'm working when I can on Parisian White with Kelly. The Kelly Sue DeConnick series, and also I'm doing a bunch of. I'm inking the final issue of over Dennis Cowan for The Question.
Oh, right on.
Yeah. And then I'm also doing a couple of covers, And I've got a couple of portraits that I'm doing as well, like commissions. I'm actually doing one of John Hamm right now. He and I, we hooked up at a coffee shop, and he really knows his comics. He's real comics fan, and so it was a real pleasure to be able to do an image of him. So there are some again with the portraiture. I find that I really am enjoying that a lot. And then I'm also working on the New Mutants posters, but that keeps getting pushed back. Couple of projects, like HBO and whatnot. But again, all of these things are sort of on hold. So
Right.
It's right now what I'm trying to do really is just sort of catch up on a lot of commissions.
Well, I don't want to distract the conversation too much, but I just wanted to say that I don't know how much you were involved, but I thought Legion was a great show.
Yeah, wasn't it? It was fantastic. Yeah, they wanted to bring me in for the first season and to do some stuff, and I think this is what I was told by the producers is that, and again, this is anecdotal, but this is what was said to me. It's that they contacted Marvel about me, and apparently, according to them, they said we don't think Bill would be interested.
What?
So they actually, this is how it was related to me from the execs, and so that's when I gave Noah Hawley and Lauren Schuler Donner and a couple of other people my direct number. I said, "Are you kidding?" I said, "I'd love to be involved," And so I did a bunch of ads and promotional stuff for the second season, and the third season I did some stuff as well as there was a lunchbox that appeared in the third season. So I did there were variations on the sort of the David Holler Manson family. So I actually did a lunchbox. So I got to make some props as well.
That's cool. Did you have any suggestions or influence on casting? Like, did you have any?
No, that was all. I mean, when I saw the cast, I went to the premiere, and it was like, I think I'd seen, I knew some of the actors. Certainly, I think I'd seen Dan Stevens in one role in a movie that he had been in. And of course, Aubrey Plaza I knew, and Gene Smart, but I really didn't have any say in that, and I was just blown away by what they did with that.
Were you familiar with Flight of the Conchords before they cast him?
A little bit, yeah, a little bit.
Were you, Jeff?
Yes, a little bit.
Checking.
Yeah. So are you involved at all in the movie? Are you are they contacting you and you're doing art for it?
For which?
For New Mutants.
Oh, yeah. Actually, I visited the set, and I told all the actors. I said, look, I'm not a dad, so I said, I'm the crazy uncle. I said, but as far as I'm concerned, you're my kids. I went right down the line. Anya, Maisie. I said, anybody fucks with you, it's like they got to go through me because you guys are great. And I've seen the last iteration of the film. I mean, I've done some. It's the Demon Bear story, obviously. So it's all of the stuff that Chris and I had done, and then Josh and Nate, the screenwriting. They knocked it out of the park, and then Josh and I become friends, and so I did some opening sequence stuff, and then I also did a lot. I did the cast portraits and some stuff for the credits as well. So, and then the posters, because although I remember, when I was growing up, I mean, you'd see a single poster for something, for a film like Apocalypse Now or, In Like Flint or any of those, the classic ones. I don't know if there's any single poster that's being done now, aside from, sort of the two big head kind of thing anymore.
Well, when you guys were working on the Demon Bear saga, like, did you and Chris talk about what you wanted it to look like and how you wanted it to be different, or was that just sort of something that happened?
That was just something that happened. I was just, it's sort of like, in some ways you can't plan out that kind of stuff. I mean, even when I was doing the painted stuff on Elektra, I remember I would, that's when I had a studio right next to Chaikin and Simonson. It was Dennis Cowan, Michael Davis, and I. And I had a studio in Westport. I mean, after I got divorced, I moved to Norwalk, which was one town away. Excuse me. And so I would spend part of the week in Manhattan, and then part of the week in Connecticut. And I was also dating a gal who lived way uptown on like 85th Street. So I would, we'd start our day. I'd actually start walking. I would literally walk from like 86 down to 29th Street and stop into bookstores and just bring my sketchbook or a camera. And I would just absorb, and I would be thinking about what I had to do in terms of the next story, like bits of the story. And then when I would get to the studio, I think I'd have like a cup of coffee and maybe a muffin or something like that, and then sit down, and it would just be like this deluge. Like this fever, like a page would just get done. And even as I was doing it, like any number of pages, I had no idea why I was doing stuff or whatever. It just felt right. I was just going on total gut instinct. I don't think you can. I mean, I didn't. It was unfamiliar to me. Certainly, when I brought it to Frank, he rewrote a lot. Joe Duffy and Archie Goodwin, God bless them. I mean, they were totally in my corner in terms of what I was trying. But I felt like I was flying blind. Like I just knew that, like that the way I was doing it was just like, not necessarily that it was, there was no predestiny or any of that stuff involved. It just happened. And I'm sure you guys have felt this as well. There are times when you're working where you feel like you're driving the car, but you're also the passenger.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah.
That kind of thing where it's like you have no idea where a piece is going.
Right.
I mean, and there were times when I was doing a lecture where I felt like I was driving and also like locked up and tied in the trunk. It was like a hot.
it was running away with
that
you.
kind of.
Right.
Yeah. What's that?
It was running away with you.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's something exhilarating about that, but also confusing. And
certainly I can relate to that. I can relate.
Yeah, of course.
The confusing part. Oh, wait, here we go with Jeff. Hold on a second.
Awesome.
Who's that character, Jeff? It looks familiar.
Yeah, it's a character.
Who is that?
Who is that?
It's the Demon Bear.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's like it's Warlock. I was gonna say. But, no, it's looking great, man. So, I keep getting the feeling that I'm just verbal diarrhea.
Oh, not at all. No, this stuff is it's amazing.
You know what I like about this? It's the quietest we've ever seen Joe.
Yeah, I'm just listening.
Joe's working on a masterpiece, I'm sure.
No, I got to be honest with you guys. I'm just dragging ass today. I've had a long week, so it's already nothing bad. Just dragging.
Long week, good. Long week, bad, or hopefully
it's all
good, man.
Just stuff that had to get done. Had to.
Yeah, no, I hear you, man.
Relocate to my other studio here, and it's been a major day today. So I'm just listening. Just listen. But Bill, actually, I will say one thing though, and also Jeff is hogging up all the time, which he really does. So I think it's nice to hear Jeff talk every once in a while. But you're only the second. I've always felt the same way about storytelling. Like I hear music as I draw it, and you're only the second person I've heard say that. Klaus Janson says it as well.
Oh, interesting.
Do you play an instrument, Bill?
I play enough guitar to bore myself. At one point in my teen years, I was in I love sports, I love drawing, I love guitars, and I discovered girls. And it was like, and I used to have to. My father used to have, as I couldn't drive yet. My father would have to drive me to the guitar lessons, and at that point, spending any time in a car alone with my dad was sort of like, like how many root canals do I really want, So it was the problem was that, I said, well, I'd read somewhere you could only serve one master, whatever. I mean, now I wish I had played it, and continued with it, because for me, in a way, it was like taking a break, but still staying in the zone. It's not like going out and grabbing a cup of coffee and kind of clearing your head. It's like you're still kind of in that art space. So when you come back to a piece, it's not like you've just stepped away with it. You come back to it with fresh eyes, but it's not like the kind of fresh eyes where you kind of you have to kind of get back in the groove. You're kind of still in that groove, but just do you play, Joe?
Yeah, I do. But what was your sport, Bill?
Well, I loved baseball. And then when I was in high school, I played lacrosse.
Nice.
Lacrosse, a man's game.
Well.
Yeah, I loved lacrosse, man. That was like when I discovered lacrosse, because I also played ice hockey with my buddies in the winter, and of course, the idea of like face masks and pads and stuff like that was just, you just didn't do that, and but then when I discovered lacrosse, it was like, it felt like it was hockey on grass, that's what it felt like to me, in terms of and also, just the finesse of the game. I mean, some of the middies that we had were just awesome, and so I really fell in love with it a lot. I mean, I still have like some of my sticks, because I played defense. I was a defensive guy.
Yeah. I never would have thought lacrosse. Baseball, I could guess. Lacrosse would not have guessed.
So
that's awesome.
Dave, did you ever play sports, or were you just like absolutely not?
I played baseball.
I mean, not toddler baseball, not t-ball. I'm talking about baseball.
Hey man, I was a little league champion.
Yeah,
I take it
awesome.
back.
You can swing it back.
Yeah. I mean, I was the biggest kid, because I had a growth spurt pretty early on. So,
Dave was like 6'3".
Dave had a full beard for Little League.
Yeah,
yeah, he's a grown man.
No, Dave looked.
Yeah, we're still waiting for Dave's voice to crack, right? Right. It's like this is his baby voice,
Yeah, I'm gonna turn
the baritone we're hearing is really like, it's the Dave version of soprano.
Yeah,
it's like, I think what will happen is Dave will start, his voice will crack and break, and then it'll be like the rumbling you hear when elephants kind of, we'll hear it in our upset our intestines. It's like the brown note.
You won't be able to hear it.
That's right. Yeah, exactly. But yeah,
you'll feel low rumble. Yeah.
Yeah.
There are a few questions, Bill. Someone wants to know how soon do you think you'll do a convention appearances again?
Like as if I have a choice in the matter at this point. I mean, I was actually probably, if we hadn't hooked up now, I mean, I think I was going to probably at this very time was going to be in Lake Como, Italy for their show. So I think it was this week coming up.
Bill, there's another crazy question.
I love that.
A guy wrote to me today on Twitter, and he says, "How do you feel as a descendant of a Nobel Prize winner?"
Henrik.
Yeah, Henry's books, fantastic adaptations were made.
Yeah, well, yeah, Henrik Sienkiewicz, Quo Vadis, and it's like my grandparents would talk about him, and at that point, it was like I was like, okay, that's cool, but I wanted to know if he did comics, you know.
Yeah, what was the prize for?
What was that?
What was his prize for?
Well, he was a journalist as well as an author, you know, a book author. So I guess he wanted. I'm blanking on what it was specifically. I mean, it may have been for like his body of work, but I have an Eisner, so
yeah.
You know.
only one?
Only one?
No, I've got a few.
Yeah.
But
Makes no sense.
I mean, I sort of feel in a weird kind of a way there was a sense of like obligation and to sort of live up to it. At the same time, I also feel I think I felt like really sort of like I was, you know, there's just again, I love comics, but I sort of felt that there was, you know, there's a world of difference between that level of writing and writing for comics in the sense of I just imagined him somehow like spinning in his grave, you know, a couple of times. But now I you know, it's just one of those odd trivia things, you know. It's like, I mean, I've thought about maybe adapting something of his, you know.
That's interesting. Yeah, this
Sienkiewicz or something, but I don't know if that's even, you know. But
a guy named Mark.
Cool.
Yeah, it's
you
know, well, look, in the big scheme of things, it's better than a poke in the eye with a sharp stick. You know? I mean,
Right.
It's not, you know, but I, you know, it is what it is. I mean, there was a point when I think it affected me more in terms of because again, growing up Polish in a very rural area, you know, and because of the, you know, the denigration and sort of the, you know, the dumb Polak jokes and all that other stuff, it was almost like, you know, and maybe also being in New Jersey, it was like I have a real sort of like I'll show them kind of a thing. It's like,
have you ever
like,
been to Warsaw?
No, I was. There were years ago I was invited, and again, this was like, again, you know, like cliches will come, you know, like they say that there are elements of truth to all cliches. And so this was quite a few years ago, and I was invited to a convention. And then I called them, I wrote them back and I said, can you pay for an extra ticket so I could bring my girlfriend? And they said, oh, no, we want it. Like, if you happen to be in the neighborhood, we'd like you to stop, you know, come by. Like, so it was like, I was invited, but it was more like, hey, come on over, you know, like there was no talk of accommodations or flights or any of that stuff. It was like somehow, and I just thought, like, that's about as stereotypically Polish as the sort of like, all of the like the negative stuff that you hear. It's like I just burst out laughing. You know, it was just like it was the kind of joke I expected to hear from some of my Irish in-laws. You know, which was so. But no, I would absolutely love to go. Absolutely love to go.
I went there a couple of years ago.
How'd you like it?
Oh, it was fantastic. I mean, but at the same time, Warsaw is a kind of a city that you see it once and you go, oh, did that.
Yeah.
Back, you know.
Well, Dave will never be invited back. Great job, Dave.
Yeah.
Well, that's fun. I saw it. It was great. You know.
Well, what was I'm curious. What was the political situation? Because I know they're getting kind of right wing there. You know,
I didn't really notice it. It was actually a weird. It wasn't even a convention. It was a book fair held in a soccer stadium, like, but not on the field, but around. You know, like the you know, where all the vending is and all that. You know, the box.
Okay, right. Well, that's yeah. Have you guys have you done like anything like the Frankfurt Book Fair and stuff
I've
like
done
that?
those book fairs, and they're pretty cool. They're different. It's a different type of convention experience.
Right.
I really dig it.
Yeah.
I mean, I had a great time. I mean, don't get me wrong. So
I would be very curious to go because I think, and I've heard this from other people when they, like, you know, Scottish people or whatever who are born here, and then they go back and they, to their roots, so to speak, for their heritage and stuff like that. It impacts them greatly. I really don't know what to expect, but I might be end up being more moved by it. I found that if you're familiar at all with a lot of the Polish film posters.
Oh yeah.
And you look at them and then you compare them to sort of the day glow stuff of American stuff. There's a level of emotion and they're living under a jackboot kind of feel to their stuff. It's really sort of dark and meaty and everything else. And it's, there's a lot more going on there. So in terms of like a cultural, impact, in the same way that like when you look at the Art Nouveau style or of art, having a certain lyricism to it, or even like Oriental art, there's in a weird kind of a way, it's part of the whole. The one thing I love about art in general is how it, people will translate their personal experiences, in a particular way. When I was in Brazil a number of times, I met so many fans who were doing their own comic books. And again, there's no real comic book industry per se there. But the need for them to tell stories and convene and kind of get together. It was really really enlightening and also, quite inspirational, inspiring to see that. So,
so do you get to travel a lot, Bill? Do you go do a bunch of shows?
Yeah, there was a period there where I traveled. So I did a lot of, it's looking great, man. Love it.
She's fun. She's a fun character.
I've heard that about her. People seem to like her.
She's good times.
Yeah, what's weird is when I do her, it's like my interpretation of her changes all the time. It's like, there are times when I feel like I get angry with myself because I've shown her eyes, because I almost felt like it's like a level of inscrutability, like if her bangs were, it's like so that you could, the mystery was there, So, and there are other times when, and again, this is something I think we've all experimented with and done, and I've seen it in all your work. Is that sometimes it's what you leave, more often than not, it's what you leave out that will make a piece than what you put in. I
could learn that a little bit.
I don't think Dan leaves anything out. He throws everything on it every time.
All right. I was going to focus on your thing there, but now
I've been watching what that little bit of glow at the end of the sword there. I was watching you do that, and it's like just that hint of warmth there. It's like maybe the angle, but it has a little bit more of a a very subtle luminosity, which is to me a lot of that kind of stuff is like sugar in your coffee. It's like a couple, like a teaspoon and not the whole bag. Sometimes
you would have made this piece, Bill, and I hate to critique Dave's work, but I typically do it a lot on this show, is if that flames coming off actually said the character's name, Magic. But Dave Dave's, he's like,
Dan, there was a while before I even got to that. You could have said it then.
Right. Bill, can I ask you a real question?
Oh, wait, Jeff.
Well, yeah, like we haven't,
Right.
So I've just been going on for an hour, like just
softballs,
talking out my
so,
rear end, but no, a real question, as opposed to
as opposed to Dan talking. You said you're finishing up a question issue. When you finish guys, you really add your character to them. Like, has anyone ever had a problem with your finishes over their layouts or pencils, or is everyone sort of just excited to have you do it?
First, people have asked me a number of times because I love writing my own stuff. I'm working on some of that stuff. Like, if anything, I just did a 10-page story for an anniversary reprinting of Marvels with Alex Ross. So Alex reached out to, I think, myself, Rude, and a couple of other guys. And so I did a 10-page story, and it got me back into like writing again and wanting to tell my own story. So Um, but people have asked me why I like inking other artists, and to me, I love the collaborative, like the aspects of comics that are the great team ups,
Like
and even some of the weird intersectional things of like styles that we wouldn't think go together. Like I remember having a conversation with somebody about who was the best inker on Kurt Swan? It's got to be George Klein. And actually, I love George Klein's inks, but I also liked some of what Jack Abel did over him as well. And and it was like it caused like a major like uproar in terms of the response I got from this person. But it was like, so taste is obviously subjective, but the medium provides a lot of that. That kind of collaborative aspect that you don't really see. And I always learn something new because I love, there is a part of me that wants to kind of pick people's brains in terms of how they see things. Because to me, that's fascinating. It's like I see what you guys do as individuals, and it's like, and I look at it and I'll study a piece and it's like, and I can see the work, I can see how it's been constructed, but it's like, it's almost like trying to like soak up as much knowledge and like a points of view as I possibly can. Cause it's like, I guess that's just that perennial student thing, and then because of also knowing the work that goes into it, that's also probably why I have like so much respect for anybody who does because it's inspiring all the time for me. When I started inking, like I inked John Buscema, and that was very nerve-wracking. My very first piece I ever inked over one of my heroes was a Gorilla Grodd piece over Carmine Infantino.
Oh wow!
And when I inked him, I remember, and I already been doing comics for a while. I remember just thinking, I'm a comic book artist. I'm inking Carmine Infantino. Right. It was like I was like 12 years old again. I was just like, oh my God. It was like, and I got to know Carmine pretty well. But to me, that was like the big moment, and I just loved the idea that inking John was one thing. Then I inked Dennis a number of years. I mean, Dennis and I have known each other forever.
Yeah, and quite a bit.
What's that again?
I said you work. I mean, you do a lot of work with Dennis over the years.
Yeah. Well, he and I mean, it's like there have been times I'll say I'm too busy, editor will call, and then Dennis will call me up or he'll text me, goes like, dude, you got it. I'm like, right. And then the editor, I'll say, all right, I'm in. And the editor go, she'll say, she or he will say, well, Dennis, you talked to Dennis, right? Didn't you? And I'm like, yeah, he did. He got me again, but I mean, I love him and I love working with him. Because he's also so incredibly, he's just so incredibly talented. Very unique style. But a lot of what we do, and we have a lot of overlap in terms of our interests. Like he's more of a shape guy, like Topi. I mean, so many guys.
I was just going to ask, Bill, how much Topi had influenced your work, but you beat me to it.
I drool over his stuff. Yeah. I mean, he was a big influence. But but even guys like, there was one painter from Buenos Aires, a watercolorist named Carlos Nine, Nine, and I just am gobsmacked. It's like I try to capture some of his, and he's partly. I mean, I took watercolor classes, and I love the medium because it's so, it's such a versatile medium, and. And it's also a hard medium. It can kick your ass, I mean, because when I work with acrylics or colored pencil or whatever, I'll go into a piece. Yeah. I mean, just the shapes that he's got going on there, it's just gorgeous. And his value arrangements. Because again, that to me, that I imagine, Joe, with you, it's sort of like when you talk about music, it's like, that's a musical piece to me, So
yeah, I mean, but his page design. I mean, I have like an entire wall covered with Topi originals. I was lucky enough to buy a bunch of them.
right.
And it's just I'm looking at the pen. I'm like, I can't fathom how it works, right? Because it's like the cross hatching. But I see it in Dennis's work, and I saw it in your work, and I was wondering if clearly there was an influence there. I do have one other question for you, because you mentioned Buscema. Well, no, sorry, Dan. You mentioned Buscema, and whenever Buscema comes up, I need to say this because I think we need to set him straight. Dan fancies himself better than Buscema. And so could you please set Dan straight, as someone who has inked Buscema? I'm sure you knew John Buscema.
I met him a few times. Yeah.
Can you please set Dan straight that he is not as good as John Buscema, please?
What is this? Yeah.
Just move on. Just tell.
No.
This is a thing.
It's like, look, I realize you guys have your own thing here. It's like, I'm not going to bite on that one. All right. What I'm going to say is that Dan kicks ass.
Oh,
and he's the best fucking Dan. I mean,
Thank you.
It's like, again, your work leaves me in awe as well. I mean, it's like I look at your work and I go, like, I have no idea what I'm doing. It's like,
first of all, you're full of shit. Second of all,
no. It's
the big difference is I don't think I'm
serious.
better than John Buscema.
Yeah. No, how was that? So you said you got a little nervous inking Buscema?
Well, the thing about John is that, he'd been inked by so many, Alcala, Ernie Chan or Chua, whatever, and his favorite inker was his brother, and I think pretty much everybody kind of agrees, even though on some of the later issues or some of the issues of Silver Surfer that were inked by Dan Adkins, I actually really liked.
Dan did a great job.
Because what John does is he gives you the perfect foundation. He would give you 6 lines and they'd be the perfect 6 lines. You can build up, you can reconnect them. You could go in and, like, he bakes the cake, and then you can come in with all the frosting and floral stuff that you want, or as much or as little as you need. It's like, but the pencilers and stuff that I've had trouble with are the ones that are like where they give you like 3 or 4 lines together, and it's like pick one, where it's like it's like it's too much erasing, and it's all very tentative. I'd rather work when somebody makes a mistake, like let it be a really definitive, like let it be a car crash, like go out, like just put something down and let it be wrong.
So you love Dan.
What's that?
Can I ask a question? Were the pencils ever quite were they layouts that loose ever for Wolverine?
No, they were. There may have been a couple, but mostly the stuff that I worked over with him were very, very spare. I mean, there were plenty of times when he would draw something where he would have the underside of, like, say, a woman's arm that was up. The underside, he might not even really hit the elbow. It's like, or whatever. It's like it's almost like connect the dots sometimes, but you got the gesture in there, and you could add the filigrees, like the hands. Like he might not finish the fingertips completely, or whatever. And he would imply someone had dark hair by just sort of scumbling in a little bit of a darker bit of pencil there. The thing is, most of the beautiful stuff that I saw were always on the backs of his pages. That was the thing. I really regret not making copies of a lot of those, because that was when he was really having fun. But to get back to Jeff's question about inking, it's like I inked Sal, when they asked me to ink Sal over Spider-Man, the editor asked if I could do name now who inks Jim Lee a lot.
Scott,
damn, but they wanted that kind of like image style of inking with a lot of lines. And I said, you got the wrong guy. And I just went totally like lights and darks with his stuff. And and I was nervous. But I actually met Sal at a show in Charlotte, the Heroes show, and he was there. And I walked up to him, and he got out from behind the table, gave me a big hug. He goes, "I love what you did." And so, but there have been artists I've worked over, like John Paul Leon. I love his work, and I inked a job over him, and he was really disappointed. And I said, I love your work. I wanted to be faithful to it. And he goes, "That's why I hate it." He goes, "You didn't do anything to it." And like somehow it was, sometimes it's like there's an expectation. I mean, I've done sketches for people, and without whiteout or any of the sort of spatter or anything. And I go, it doesn't need it. But somehow they equate that, it's like going to some, like the guy who used to do all the announcing for the WWE. Come on, you got to say it. Like, "Let's get ready to rumble." It's like that kind of, it's like playing your greatest hits or something that people know you for, kind of a thing.
Yeah,
but
Kevin Nolan inked Jeff on a cover, and I remember Jeff was all excited. He basically wanted Kevin to redraw it.
I wanted him to Kevin Nolan it up, and he liked it, and so he didn't change anything. And I asked him about it. He goes, "Oh no, it was fine." I'm like, "Well, that's
yeah." So actually, I did go in. When I had to actually get a reassurance from John Paul. I said, "Are you sure about this?" And like Dennis and I have a shorthand. It's like he'll send me something. It's like I know what he wants. It's like, and so it's really like a jazz improv thing. But in terms of somebody really disliking what I've done, at one point DC contacted me to ink a bunch of Jim Aparo stories, and I was and remain a huge Jim Aparo guy. I love his work. I mean, and there was a point, and again, this is the one thing, not to get political or anything else, but this is the one thing about the business, or we all love the medium, and maybe what we deal with the business, but the guys like Kirby or Nick Cardy or Carmine, or Gene Colan, or all these older guys, it's like there is no gold retirement watch. It's like for these guys. So a lot of them sort of they go with a pencil in their hand, and of course when you get to a certain age, I mean, it happened if you've ever looked at Norman Rockwell's final painting that was on his easel, I think it was Brady taking a photo of a Lincoln, and it was and you could tell it's like, the eyesight goes, the dexterity goes, and not everybody is sort of like was it Monet with water lilies, like painting on with a stick from like 6 feet away, because they don't, just sort of making these large shapes. And at that point, I think Aparo's work was losing some of his faces, like things were sort of flattening out a little bit. And they asked me to address that in the inks. And I never met Jim, but we had a two-hour conversation about everything, about his career and art. And then at the very end, before we hung up, he said, "I have a favor to ask." And I said, "You got it, whatever." He goes, "Please stop fucking with my faces."
Wow.
Yeah. And I went, "You got it. And I called up the editors and I said verbatim, and because to me it's like there's this mutual respect thing, and it's like, I mean, I'm sure all of you are mutually respect each other over there. It's like, despite all of you, but the thing is that when I said them, it's like that was kind of one of the things they had wanted me to do. And it was like, and then I think shortly after that, I think they canceled his book, and then I think he died shortly, not too long thereafter.
Way to go, Bill! You killed him.
It's
my first book is,
but it's artist prerogative. It's like if somebody says, "Can you not do this?" It's like, you got it. It's like I won't, I'll honor that. and over, an editorial, directive in that way, because I think I understand the idea that they want that it's a business and everything else, but if it's an artist that I respect and admire, it's like, and they want a certain thing, I sort of feel as like this moral, binding aspect to it in terms of respect. So, so I think whenever I'm inking anybody else, it's sort of like with the full knowledge that, I mean, there have been times I think I'm being incredibly faithful, and people say no, it's like we can tell, and I don't see it, because my ultimate goal is to be as invisible as possible. Like I almost don't, that younger stuff of wanting to have a definitive style, like I want to look like Neil, or I want to look like Bob Peak, or I want to, and you sort of become this culmination of all of your influences. Now I kind of job to dictate, and that's really one thing. The work will tell me what it wants to be. Like if I'm doing a portrait of somebody, it will let me know. Sometimes I'll work on a piece and it'll go, I'm not, it's like, put away your color, your paints. It's like, this is a black and white piece, and I just have to kind of go with the gut thing. I wish I could explain the sort of the emotional stuff behind it, and I know that a lot of artists sort of are loath to talk about their methods or their reasons or whatever. I mean, I could walk somebody through technically how to do something or whatever. But if somebody were to say, why did you choose this particular angle or any of that stuff, that a lot of that is just sort of gut stuff.
Some people are just selfish, like Joe. They actually have reasons, but they won't disclose them or share.
Yeah, never.
Well, it's interesting. They're like little things. I've worked really hard. Oh, that's great.
Who's that?
Damn. It's sort of like Wolverine meets Legion.
Yeah.
It's like my last name. I mean, even when I was learning cursive writing, to all those kids out there who don't remember what cursive handwriting is, it's like, it's when you connected all the letters.
Right.
But I remember even when as a kid, I'd get to the letter K. It'd be S-I-E-N-K. Oh, fuck it. It would just be this scribble. And I worked really hard to get my signature as streamlined and as much like a doctor's prescription for like Xanax or something.
Your signature is crazy. It's awesome.
Yeah, well, it's like the bare minimum. And so like when I'll see like Joe, when like Joe's the Casada signature
with that Q,
I am like,
yeah.
What I am like always so like impressed. Like just forget the work. The work itself it blows me away anyway. But when you do that signature, it's just like like fuck yeah,
What do you think of this signature here, Dave's?
Well, there you go. I mean, it's so him. I mean, that's what's so cool about it, is that everybody. Do you ever imagine? I mean, every one of your guys' work, like the way you sign your work is like, and I think all of our art is almost calligraphic. At one point, I thought about just approaching every one of my friends and have them do a line, just draw a line, in ink or whatever, and because if you look at like Terry Austin's ink line. It's like there's he would do a lot of the backgrounds and stuff for Neil. There's a kind of like staccato quality to his inking, Nice.
Well, that's how I sign.
I think he wants the signature critique, Bill. That's what I mean.
Yeah, it's the same as
signature.
As Dave Johnson. I just add an extra J in the front.
But there's a lot of lines, very linear, almost like.
Oh yeah, now I see. Okay, I see. See the signature. Yes, but everybody's artwork in some respect can sort of be reduced, and this is a really extreme kind of off the wall sort of digression, but the idea that everybody's work can be reduced to a certain kind of line. Perfect. It's like, it's also art in itself. Every one of your signatures is like a microcosm of your work. Mm-hmm. It's like like when Dave Johnson puts the slashes in the O's, it's like that's a great aspect to his work. Same thing with casadas. It's like, you know, there's like a cleanliness and an abstraction aspect to it, and I mean, it's like when I look at a lot of Dave's work, Dave Johnson stuff, it's like there's a kind of a Russian constructivist feel that can come through a lot, and at the same time, that work feels like there's a solidity to it. You know, when I look at like Dan's work, it's like there's a free form of like thins and thicks that happen in what you do, and like a kind of a freewheeling kind of like, you know, Rat Pack kind of feel to it. You know,
oh, thanks, Bill. Appreciate it. Thank you.
And your signature has that. You know what I mean? So maybe I'm kind of just bringing way too much objectivity into it.
Bill, I'll show you this. I'll show you the science behind my signature.
All right, let's see it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so this is a lecture I was working on, but won't finish today. So because I can always tell exactly when I sign something exactly where I was, but just so you understand exactly what happened. So here is that. Hang on, why are we not? Here we go. All right, so that first shape, right? Hang on, let me get a small brush. So that first circular shape, right? Then there's that little hash mark. Here's your Q, right? I give another little hash mark. We got a J, then that creates the E. So you got the Joe Q, and then depending on the year, I'll use that little hash there. Let's say it was you know, we're in 21, it'd be 21 here. But also this became EIC when I was editor-in-chief.
Oh.
Yes, yeah. And then
Easter egg.
What was that?
But this is, I mean, see, this is like fascinating stuff to me. It's like, you know, it's the thinking behind the stuff. To me, that's also part of what is so impressive is that we've all seen draftsmen and painters who are great, who never leave their attic. But the thinking, you know, that everybody does in their work and in their construction and the choices that they make, that's the ineffable part to me that is fascinating. You know, because it's so individual.
You know how this came about, because I'll sign my original artwork, you know, with the full name, right? But this came about because I was doing a signing for Dynamic Forces back in the Azrael days, and they had released the trade paperback, and I signed 35,000 trade paperbacks in one day.
Good God!
Oh my God!
But that's where it became that. So
yeah. Wow, that's cool. Well, thank you so much for that. That's you know, that's cool. Very enlightening. Very enlightening.
There's some great signatures out there where you look like a Norman Rockwell, obviously, is a famous one. You got Frank Miller's FM that is very definitive. Right. Michael Golden has had a whole bunch of different signatures over the years.
Yeah, there's one of him. It looks almost like the not GE, but what's the company that bought out GE or GE?
Yeah, you're right.
The LG.
Yeah.
It's like, well, Golden's a madman anyway. I mean, you know, it's like I remember being at a show with him one time. We were sitting together, and he was drawing one of the Micronauts, and he drew the outline. He drew the external contour, and this is when Frank had Elektra had just, you know, the issue that Elektra had died came out. And there was a fan who came up to both of us at a show and was like, because I think he was like really upset. He said, "Is Elektra really dead?" And I said, "Well, Frank says, you know, Frank writes and draws it, so I guess so. You know, it's like, well, how do you know she's dead? You know?" And I said,
"Fair point.
I'm pretty sure. You know, I've talked to Frank. It's like, and you know, and Mike at that point is looking up at him and goes back to his drawing or whatever. And then the guy just sort of freaks out and he goes, "Well, how does Frank know she's dead? How does anybody know she's dead?" And then he just proceeded to sort of do the ending of Altered States, you know, where he's like ramming us, like he's hitting books, like boxes of books, like as he's walking away, you know. and Mike just went drawing. It was like, and he just filled in all of the other elements. It was like, I think John Buscema told me that he watched, who was it? There was some European artist that he said that he watched do a drawing of a guy on horseback starting with the left rear hoof, and then just did it, and like for
bit, Travis Charest will start just like with an ear or like a nose or an eye,
right.
and then just draw the rest of it out. And I mean, I don't think he does it all the time, but a lot of stuff, I've seen him do it. It's very interesting,
Yeah, it's like, it reminds me of somewhat of the when I was a kid, and again, this is definitely dating me, but like watching like the magic drawing board on like Captain Kangaroo or something like that.
Oh, yeah.
It's like where you see this magic happen. But like I remember I was in Grenoble a number of years ago, and Sergio Aragonis and I had it was late. It was like 2:00 in the morning. We both couldn't sleep, so we went out for a walk. And it was snow. I think it was kind of snowy and stuff. And we just had a really long talk. I mean, and really, it was great, like a great bonding experience, because he's also one of my heroes. And his work, he was a big influence in me as well, on my work as well. And somebody asked me how, and I said, if you look at the way he does, like if he does a kid's face and the kid is sad, the mouth will extend beyond the perimeters of the head. It's like, so the kid is really sad, that cartooning, that truth through the lie aspect of it. And I said, you're known as being like the fastest cartoonist on the planet. I said, how did that come about? And he just simply said, he goes, if I'm drawing and the pen goes this way, he goes, I don't try to correct it. I just go with it. So it's like, he just lets it flow. And that was a big, it's a sense of being in control enough to be out of control, and because the idea of perfection is impossible, and and Joe Kubert and I used to talk about this quite often, because I taught there for a little while, and he said that a piece can be academically perfect, or let's say this, put it this way, I think it could be academically imperfect, but emotionally spot on. So it's like, so a lot of stuff that is really accurate, and even using photo reference is something that I find that, there's a lot of sort of the in-betweening stuff where stuff sort of looks posed and it kind of lacks a lot of drama. The thing is to sort of try to like really get to the extremes. It's theater, it's not over there. It's the grand gesture, it's like there.
I think using photo reference, I think you got to look at the best way I've found, and I've done everything from, you're like, okay, I'm going to draw over this photograph, or I'm going to look at the photograph and use it as inspiration. And every single time, without fail, if you're just using the photo as reference, there's going to be so much spontaneity and so much more life to it. It's your interpretation of how you feel.
Absolutely, yeah.
About that photo.
Yeah. Well, there was, for example, I remember I was doing a portrait of Mick Jagger, and Dave Stewart had taken a bunch of photos of him when he was touring with Joss Stone and Damian Marley, and they had their band called Super Heavy. So Dave sent me a bunch of his photos to work from, and so I just found this great shot of Jagger, and so I basically made it, I copied and put in photo, and I said, let me just try lightboxing the photo, because it's such a great photo. And when I did it, it didn't look like Jagger. It kind of looked like an older woman, like a lady, like it just like he looked at. So what I did was I started to Mort Drucker him, and I started to stretch things and pull things, and it's like the exaggeration looked right, but the actual physical, like literally like trying to nail it from working directly over the photo, no luck. It was just a misfire. So you're right. I mean, I've done similar drawings where I've started at one point and just see where the lines go, and then sometimes I'll do a rough layout kind of a thing. So I think we've, I'm assuming maybe incorrectly. I mean, I don't know if you guys have worked in all different ways of trying stuff, different methods.
Well,
what's that?
Yeah, you have to. Otherwise, you hit your own glass ceiling all the time.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
I'm drawing a portrait of you, Bill, and I hope it's not, because you're on this show, it's not like one of your portraits where it's like, you're doomed.
Yeah. No. Hey, come on. I get that a lot. People will see a drawing that I post of somebody, that's like a celebratory piece, and then or a happy birthday, and people will somewhere in the comments someone will say, "I thought this person died," and it's like, and I'm like, God damn it, I got to start doing more birthday drawings for people or something like that. I mean, God forbid I'm doing baby pictures for somebody, or a child, doing a portrait of a kid 5 years old, and the parents call the police on me or something. It's like, this man he put a hex on our child.
the power.
Hey guys, I apologize, but I got to get going. So Bill was awesome.
Well, thank you, man.
Well, oh my God, we're at 2 hours now. Bill, you're amazing.
Yeah, thanks, Bill.
Bill, how are you doing, man? I'm having a great time. Next time, it's I'm going to try to join you in on the drawing portion of this, because I want to get you talk about the lockdown and going to shows. I bought a house at the beginning of the year. It's and it's been sitting empty since January, and it's and I'm waiting for, I've assured all the neighbors. I said, look, I'll be wearing a mask. It's the movers. It's whatever. It's it's this limbo thing, So it's that's been the goal, is to get into a new place. So it's you don't get out to see people. So this has been delightful.
Well, we'd love to have you back anytime, Bill. And next time, maybe you'll have your camera set up, because I know you have all that.
That was my point, is that getting into a new place and having actually a nice big, because right now I'm you can't see but behind me, because I'm in my large front studio, but there's a majority of, there's moving boxes that have not been made into boxes yet, that kind of thing, where they come in a pallet and just, you have to, so it's going to be interesting times. So, but you guys all look well, nobody's sort of doing the crazy beard thing. Of course, Dave is always, I think he's always
Dave
sort of
always looks that
got
way.
the beard
Yeah.
going. I saw Walt. What's that?
So Walt was out of control.
Yeah, Walt.
Walt kind of, he's going full David Letterman,
Yeah.
It's
No, he was
anyway,
great. You've been great. Thank you so much, Bill.
Well, it's been my absolute pleasure. And, again, it's as long as you don't, you and everybody else out there who tuned in, as long as you didn't feel like I sort of was nonsensical or rambled on.
No, you were completely.
It's been a real
guys, I got to go. I really got to run. Take care, guys.
Right, bye, Joe.
Hey, Bill. Thank you, guys. Take care.
All right.
Bye.
Be well. Thank you, everybody.
Typically, when Joe leaves, we have a little bit better time.
Yeah.
So we kind of wait. We're kind of quiet. We're waiting. Is Joe going to go? And
right. It's
he doesn't.
I think it's sort of I mean, I love Joe, but I've had those kinds of experiences where
Well, no, Joe's been. It's probably the most busy he's ever been. So, right. And he's got everything with with what we're faced with now. All our families are coming together, and so he's with his whole family is it's a lot everybody's facing, except for Ben, because he's family one thing, and then he's a separate thing. He comes first, and they come second. So
it's all about me.
Yeah. Well, guys, I have to roll out too.
Man. It's the right kind of selfishness is what helps us. It's like if you're not good for yourself, you're no good for anybody else.
It's kept Dan alive this long, so there must be something to it.
I am very selfish. I am. Jeff, I can excuse Joe because Joe's. But where are you going? Do you got a hot date, or what's happening?
Well, I have to make dinner. I have to take care of my wife, Dan.
What are you making?
Lamb chops.
Man.
Lamb chops.
Yeah, I'm grilling lamb chops.
Maybe you got to eat at 10 o'clock.
Dinner.
Yeah,
Looks wonderful.
You can't cook lamb fast. You're gonna have rubber.
Chops. We get the chops. Grill them up.
It's bad form.
Bill, I'll cook you dinner sometime now that you're an LA guy.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, no, I've been an LA guy for the last several years. I just but as much as I actually allow myself to go out, I might as well be in Anchorage. But with one of the things about the house is that it's big, and it's like, and I want to actually be able to have people over. Like the studio space is bigger than my whole place is right now, like the entirety. That's just for the studio. And so I want to be able to have artists come in and work together and just relax and just create, because I have been in studios with other artists and I love it, and I've also worked by myself and I'm okay with that. But at a certain point, especially with where we're at now, the idea of who knows how it's going to change society after this, but the idea of actually being in, they could come over and still be 6 feet away and
perfect.
So
I remember I went over to I don't know if you remember Michael Turner, but Mike Turner had he had a great place on Wilshire, near I guess it's near Santa Monica Boulevard, in that kind of area where all those high rise. He had He had a great penthouse, and he had a studio, but he had this amazing view. Like it was. I mean, Mike Turner was getting all sorts of Witchblade money, so he had lots of money. Right. The guy was doing great. And he put a beautiful glass drawing board in the living room, and for whatever reason, like, it did not seem out of place there. And I guess the thought process is, most of the time, all of us are living in their houses, working in their houses. He's like, why not be in the best room in the house while I'm doing this instead of? It changed my life. Well, like when I turned my drawing board around instead of facing a wall, facing outward. I'm like, well, now my world is just expanded in such a way.
Exactly. That's also depends on how you're working. I mean, I find that like I've got a huge, like a 5-foot light box, angled board, and I've got like easels that I work on. But a lot of times what I'll do is because if I'm working in certain pieces, I'll have colored pencils and watercolors. So I find that often I feel like I'm in a race car or a cockpit, where it's like I'm kind of just got everything around me and overhead, and so it's like this, like, and I end up starting to work a lot smaller, and it starts to feel like the walls are closing in. So it's amazing. Like everybody's got their own thing.
Those studio books are really cool, where they show everybody's. It's interesting to see their spaces. Yes, I think Insight did one that book that we did together. That we were at the Artist Society.
Yes, right. Yes, yeah, right.
Those studio spaces. It was so cool to see everybody's, working arrangements. It's unusual.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that arrangement. It's like I've used it less and less because, like I said, I'm in one place, and it's like, it's more of a. Like I'm somewhere between like an art supply store and a hoarder, It's like that kind of a thing. It's like I've just got like reference material and paints and
models on standby.
Models on standby, exactly. Yeah. Well, how many of you have done this where it's like you're looking for a circle template and you can't find one, and then so you go online and you buy one, and then
or you just have
and then you end up with like 13. Well, there you go. 13 circle templates. And then by the time you get it, you don't really need it because you've moved on to something else.
Use the plate.
Yeah, plate. That's true. Yeah,
saucer or some of the things.
All the time.
Yeah.
All the and then, the worst for me is when if I have a cup of coffee and it's on a plate, and then I turn it over and I realize that there's some coffee on it, and it's like a perfectly white piece of paper. Damn.
Looking like Bill Sienkiewicz.
Awesome. Nice movement on that too, man.
Thanks.
So where are all you guys located? I mean, Dan, you're like
I'm in LA. Right. Ben is up in some kind of
from Missouri.
Where?
Missouri.
Oh, okay. Which part?
Central.
Okay, yeah. I have friends in Joplin, and I love and also Kansas City, Missouri. And Dave is now back. You were in what, Atlanta for a while?
Yeah, but I've been back. I've been trying to come to your studio for a year or two.
Well, that's what I feel bad about that. So is Dennis, and I mean, it's like, I feel part of it is just simply, maintaining a level of self-respect. It's like, because it's like, the idea of seeing sausage made. Oh my God, that's great. It's like, I want to have a place that I feel like is inviting, because right now it's Punxsutawney Phil time. I'm like, I'm in my hole, and but it'll happen. It'll happen. I'm
I can't wait to see you again in person. And in the
same here. I mean, thanks so much, gentlemen. It's been a real pleasure, and great stuff as always. Keep kicking ass, all of you. I mean, it's like, and thanks for the daily inspiration. And under the breath cursing as well.
Exactly. Right.
Gentlemen, be well.
All right.
All right, Bill.
You'll never hear a sign off like this again, until next time you're back on the show. Ben,
okay.
I don't know if there's anything left, man. It's been a great show. Everybody stay safe, have fun out there. We'll see you next week. I'm sure we'll have somebody excellent and crazy next week, or maybe just no one. Maybe just us. Yeah. Maybe just.
I'm kind of curious now. I'm kind of curious. It's like, who
can we get to follow that? That was ridiculous.
I don't know.
Take care, everyone. Stay safe.
Take care, everyone.
Wash your hands.
Bye, guys.
Please.